Winter, 1945. Germany lay in ruins, a land of ash, hunger, and silence. The war had ended, but peace had not yet arrived. A young British soldier trudged through the wreckage of a small German village. Snow clung to his boots. The smell of burnt timber followed every breath. His uniform was clean. His conscience was not. He had fought for 6 long years, crossed battlefields that had erased entire generations. Now, as he patrolled streets lined with broken glass and hollow homes, he felt no victory, only emptiness. Behind a collapsed bakery wall, movement caught his eye. A sound. Faint, desperate. A child. Barefoot. Gaunt. Eyes too old for a face so small. The boy was digging through rubble, clutching something, a frozen crust of bread. The soldier froze. His training said caution. His humanity said help him. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small ration tin. His own meal for the day. He looked around. No officers, no witnesses, just a silent village and a starving child. The tin clicked open. Beans and hard biscuits. He placed it gently before the boy. For a moment, nothing happened. The child stared, unsure if it was real. Then, trembling, he reached forward, and the soldier saw tears fall onto the metal lid before the boy took the first bite. That day, in a world divided by hatred, one soldier made a choice that defied every order, every boundary, and every reason war tried to teach him. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about sides. It was about one human being recognizing another, even in the ruins of everything. The story began in the dying months of the Second World War, when victory tasted like ash and silence was louder than gunfire. Europe had stopped fighting, but the world it left behind was barely alive. Germany, once proud and defiant, was now a skeleton of stone. Cities like Hamburg, Cologne, and Dresden lay flattened, their streets coated in the gray dust of homes that no longer existed. Bridges had collapsed into frozen rivers, and church bells, once symbols of peace, hung cracked and voiceless. Into this landscape marched the soldiers of the Allied occupation, men who had survived the front lines but now faced something more complicated, rebuilding what they had once been ordered to destroy. Among them was Private William Harper, a 24-year-old from Manchester. He'd enlisted at 18, fought across France, and seen comrades buried under mud and steel. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Harper expected relief. Instead, he found something far heavier: the quiet aftermath of victory. His regiment was stationed near Hanover, tasked with maintaining order in the British sector. The locals were broken, scattered, and starving. Food was scarce, heat was a luxury, and hope was a memory. Every day, German civilians lined the streets as British convoys passed, their eyes hollow, their bodies frail. Many were widows, many were children. All were hungry. Soldiers were told to keep distance. "No fraternizing," the officers said. "You're not here to make friends. You're here to enforce peace." To the men in uniform, that meant control. To the civilians, it meant survival under watchful eyes. But rules fade quickly when confronted by hunger. Harper saw it in the faces that waited outside the camp fence. Mothers clutching babies, boys scrounging for discarded rations. He saw it in the way even dogs fought over crumbs near the soldiers' mess hall. He'd been told the Germans were the enemy. For years, every order, every poster, every film had reminded him of that. But now, standing among the ruins, the word enemy felt hollow. The people before him were not soldiers. They were survivors, stripped of everything except the will to live. One morning, during a routine patrol through a nearby town, Harper saw the same child again, the one who'd searched for bread beneath rubble. He couldn't forget the boy's face, the wide, frightened eyes, the hands trembling from cold, the quiet dignity even in starvation. Harper asked around the village, but no one seemed to know the boy's name. Some said his parents had been killed in an air raid months ago. Others whispered he was one of many. The lost children, they called them. Orphans wandering from town to town, begging or stealing just to survive another night. The British Army issued strict orders. No personal aid to civilians. Any food given away could mean punishment. Supplies were rationed even among soldiers. Still, Harper couldn't forget that moment, the boy's tears mixing with the snow as he ate. That night in the barracks, Harper opened his ration pack again. He looked at the small tin of meat, the hard biscuits, and the chocolate bar labeled emergency use only. He thought of the boy, somewhere out there in the freezing dark, clutching scraps of bread from a war he hadn't started. War had trained him to follow orders, but something deeper, something older than the war, told him that obeying humanity was more important than obeying command. And in that realization, the story truly began, not of soldiers and uniforms, but of conscience and courage. The next morning began like all others, gray, cold, and empty. A thin fog hung over the ruins, softening the edges of broken chimneys and shattered windows. Private Harper stood at his post, rifle slung across his back, pretending not to see the figures lurking beyond the fence. Children mostly, silent, watchful, waiting for the soldiers to look away. It was a routine he knew too well, a cruel game of survival. The soldiers tossed their leftovers into the trash, and within seconds the children would scramble through mud and ash to claim what little remained. Harper hated that sound, the rustle of hunger, the desperate scramble of small hands. He had started saving part of his meal, wrapping biscuits in his handkerchief, hiding them in his coat pocket. It was forbidden but necessary. He told himself it was temporary, just until proper aid arrived. But deep down, he knew no help was coming soon. Each day, he found the same boy waiting near the edge of the old bakery ruins. The boy never spoke. He only stared as if torn between gratitude and fear. Harper would nod, place a small packet on the ground, and walk away before anyone noticed. For weeks, this silent ritual continued. The boy grew stronger. His cheeks filled slightly. His eyes regained a faint spark of life. Harper found himself thinking of his younger brother back home. Same age, same fragile frame. A boy who slept safely in a warm bed while another froze in a broken country. But kindness in war is never without consequence. Rumors spread within the ranks. Someone had been sharing rations with locals. An officer made it clear, whoever is caught will face disciplinary action. Compassion is not your duty. Control is. That night Harper couldn't sleep. The words echoed in his mind like gunfire. He had followed every order, survived every battle, obeyed every command. But this, denying food to a starving child, felt like a betrayal far worse than desertion. On a freezing December evening, the situation reached its breaking point. Harper's unit was assigned to clear a bombed railway depot on the outskirts of town. The operation was routine, but danger always hid in the ruins. Landmines, snipers, or desperate civilians scavenging for scraps. As they approached the depot, Harper heard a noise, faint footsteps in the rubble. He turned his rifle instinctively, heart pounding. From behind a collapsed crate, the boy emerged, barefoot, shivering, holding a piece of twisted metal. Not a weapon, just a toy, bent and broken. "Stay back," barked Sergeant Miller, Harper's superior. "Get that kid out of here." Harper hesitated. The boy didn't move. His lips were blue, his hands trembling. He looked at Harper. Not the sergeant, not the soldiers, but him, the man who had shared food, the one face he knew among strangers. Miller raised his voice again. "Private, you know the order. No contact with civilians. Send him away." But Harper couldn't. The boy's condition was worse than before. He could barely stand. Harper stepped forward, lowering his rifle. "He's not a threat, sir. He's starving." Miller's expression hardened. "That's not our problem. He'll die out here," Harper said quietly. "Then let him. The war made this mess, not us." The air grew tense. Every soldier watched, waiting to see who would yield, the officer or the conscience. Harper reached into his bag, pulled out his ration tin, and placed it on the ground between them. "Sir, if feeding him is a crime," he said, voice steady, "then I'll answer for it." The sergeant glared but said nothing. The silence felt heavier than any gunfire. Finally, he muttered, "You just signed yourself a report, Harper." Harper didn't care. The boy stumbled forward, took the tin, and knelt in the snow, eating as if each bite pulled him back from death. The soldiers looked away, some out of discomfort, others out of shame. From that day, Harper's relationship with his unit changed. Whispers followed him. "Too soft," they said. "Bleeding heart." In a world hardened by battle, compassion was seen as weakness, but Harper didn't see weakness in that act, only truth. He had fought for victory, but in that moment he found something far greater: the simple, quiet triumph of humanity over hatred. Still, acts of kindness in war rarely remain hidden. A few days later, Harper was summoned to headquarters. The officer in charge, stern, polished, cold, placed a report on the table. "Private Harper," he said, "you're accused of disobeying direct orders and supplying rations to civilians." Harper didn't deny it. He stood tall, hands behind his back. "Yes, sir." "Do you understand the seriousness of this?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you do it?" Harper hesitated, then answered softly, "Because I couldn't not." The officer studied him for a long moment, then closed the file. "You'll be reassigned to guard duty outside Hanover. Consider this your warning. No court-martial, no punishment, just distance." A silent acknowledgement that even war could not fully erase conscience. Harper left the office feeling both relieved and hollow. He had saved one boy, perhaps only for a few more days. But in that fragile act, he had also saved a part of himself, the part war had tried so hard to destroy. And as the snow continued to fall over Germany, he knew the story wasn't over yet. The war had ended on paper, but the real victory was still to come. Winter turned cruel in early January. The snow hardened to ice, and wind tore through the ruins like a living thing. The town near Hanover, once filled with whispers and movement, now looked abandoned again. Even the stray dogs had vanished, leaving behind only tracks that led nowhere. Private Harper was stationed on the outskirts, near a supply checkpoint. His new post was quiet, too quiet. He stood in the cold for hours, watching the same broken landscape, hearing only the wind against tin roofs. The war had ended, but the emptiness that followed was its own kind of punishment. He often thought of the boy. He hadn't seen him since that day at the depot. Some said the lost children had been taken to makeshift camps by relief workers. Others said many never made it that far. Harper hoped the boy had survived, though part of him feared the truth. One evening, as dusk settled and the last convoy passed through, Harper spotted movement again by the edge of the old railway line. A small figure, fragile, limping, emerged from behind the rail cars. The same boy, but now he was worse. His clothes hung from him like rags, his lips cracked, his skin pale beneath the grime. He carried something under his arm, a bundle wrapped in cloth. When he reached Harper, he unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a dented ration tin. Empty, polished clean. Harper understood immediately. It was the one he had given him weeks ago. The boy held it out like an offering, his eyes saying what his lips could not. "Thank you." Harper knelt down. "Keep it," he whispered. But the boy shook his head. He wanted to return it, perhaps as a gesture of pride, or because even in starvation he understood dignity. Harper's throat tightened. He could feel the weight of the world in that small, trembling hand. He placed his glove over the boy's and pushed the tin gently back. "You need it more than I do." The boy's body shivered violently. He was burning with fever. Harper could see it. The red flush under pale skin, the glassy eyes. The cold was killing him. There were no medics nearby, no officers who would allow a German child inside the British camp. Harper looked toward the checkpoint. One guard, 2 floodlights, a fence. Rules stood between compassion and crime. He looked back at the boy, who could barely stand, and in that instant, Harper made his decision. He took off his overcoat and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. "Stay close to me," he whispered. "Don't say a word." They approached the checkpoint together. Harper's heart raced. The guard, Corporal Evans, raised an eyebrow. "Who's the kid?" "Local orphan," Harper replied, steady but cold. "Got permission from HQ. Medical case." Evans frowned. Since when do we take them in? Since now, Harper said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of command he didn't have. There was a moment of silence, the kind that could decide everything. Then Evans exhaled sharply. Fine. Your problem, not mine. Inside the barracks, Harper found an empty storage room, dusty, unused. He laid the boy on a blanket, lit a small oil lamp, and shared his last emergency ration. The boy ate slowly this time, as if aware that every bite mattered. Harper sat beside him, exhausted but calm. The world outside had turned to ice, but inside that dim room something human still breathed. Days passed in secrecy. Harper hid the boy each night, bringing small portions of food from the mess hall, warming water to clean his wounds. The fever broke, but the cough remained. Each dawn, he prayed no officer would open the wrong door. But secrets, like smoke, never stay hidden for long. One morning, Sergeant Miller entered the storage area unexpectedly. His eyes narrowed as soon as he saw the small figure under the blanket. "What the hell is this?" Harper stood between them. "He's sick, sir." "Just a child." "You've gone too far this time," Miller said, his voice rising. "You disobeyed orders, stole rations, lied to command. For what? A German boy?" Harper didn't move. "For a human being." Miller stared at him. Disbelief, anger, maybe even confusion. "You think the world changes because you saved one kid?" Harper's voice was calm. "It changes for him." There was a long pause. The only sound was the boy's weak breathing. Miller exhaled through his nose, muttered something under his breath, and turned away. "You've got 1 hour. After that, I never saw either of you." He left. The door closed. Harper felt his knees weaken. Relief and fear collided in his chest. He knelt beside the boy, whispering softly, "You're going to be okay." The next morning, Harper carried the child to the main road, where relief trucks passed daily toward the refugee camps. He waited until one stopped, a Red Cross vehicle. The driver, a woman in a gray coat, opened the door. "Another orphan?" Harper nodded. "Please, take him somewhere safe." The woman reached down and lifted the boy inside. The child turned one last time, clutching the metal tin in his hands. He smiled faintly. A fragile, fleeting thing. And then the truck drove away. Harper stood in the snow, watching until it disappeared over the hill. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought the war had erased. Peace. He had disobeyed orders, broken rules, and risked punishment. But in doing so, he had done something far greater. He had remembered what it meant to be human. Years passed. The world rebuilt itself from the bones of war. Nations redrew their borders. Cities rose from the rubble. And the men who had once fought returned home to live quiet lives, carrying memories they never spoke of. William Harper went back to Manchester. He became a postman, a simple job that kept him walking, breathing, seeing people smile again. But even as the noise of peace filled the streets, his mind often drifted back to that winter in Germany. The snow, the silence, the small boy holding a ration tin. He never learned the child's name. Records were scarce, and the war had scattered families across continents. But every Christmas, Harper left an unopened ration tin on his windowsill, a silent tribute to the boy who had taught him that kindness was stronger than war. In the decades that followed, Harper rarely spoke of what he had done. To him, it wasn't heroism. It was something simpler, a moment when instinct chose mercy over obedience. But those who served with him remembered. Some spoke quietly of the soldier who defied orders to feed a German child. It became a rumor, a story passed through the years, too small for history books, yet too powerful to be forgotten. One spring morning, in 1972, Harper received a letter. The handwriting was neat but unfamiliar. The return address read, Hamburg, West Germany. Inside was a short note, written in careful English. "Dear Mr. Harper, you may not remember me, but I have never forgotten you. In 1945, near Hanover, you gave food to a starving boy. That boy was me. I survived. I was taken to a camp by the Red Cross and later adopted by a kind family. I have a wife now and children of my own. I teach history to remind them that even in war, there are good men. Thank you. for choosing kindness when the world had forgotten it. Yours, Emile Keller. Harper sat for a long time, staring at the paper, tears tracing down his weathered face. He folded the letter, placed it inside the ration tin on his windowsill, and closed the lid gently. He never replied. Not because he didn't want to, but because some stories don't need more words. The silence itself becomes sacred. When Harper died years later, the tin was found beside his bed. Inside the letter remained, along with a small photograph. A family of 4 standing in front of a school, smiling beneath a German sky. History remembered generals, battles, and treaties. But this was something else entirely. It was the kind of victory no army could record, no medal could honor. A single act of compassion, performed in the bleakest winter of war, had crossed decades and borders, proving that sometimes the quietest choices echo the loudest through time. In the end, war destroys nations, but kindness, even from a single soldier, can rebuild the soul of the world. And in the silence that followed, the earth seemed to remember that moment, when one soldier shared his rations with a starving child, and for a brief instant, humanity triumphed over war.